Okay, good morning. Today is day 26 of videos discussing thoughts in a day of a life of me as a human with schizophrenia. And yes, schizophrenia is uh, inflicted upon me through something called cognitive war that NATO discusses. And in events that occur around the world, there are multifacetation aspect to the events in which communication comes to me as a schizophrenic. And sometimes this is like a psychological war, other times it's like messaging. And so, yes. And I'm going to start today by discussing in my book, We Are Electric, which is about the neurocode and bioelectricity in the body and the electrome that supposedly makes up everyone's bodies. It discusses in there Norbert Wiener, who was an author and scientist, a researcher, who wrote a book about cybernetics in 1948. And so he wrote a book about cybernetics in 1948, and cybernetics is the control of human animals or animals with uh, bioelectricity or electrical means, and it's a melding of man and machines. So this happened in 1948, which I imagine was maybe related to research that happened in World War II or even earlier. As I said in another video, there was a scientist by the name of Richard Catone, I think his name was, and he was studying electrical activity of the brain going back to 1875. So that was publicly going on. So at the very least, it goes back to 1875. Okay, so this is 1948. This guy wrote a book all about cybernetics. And so this gets into a little bit the idea of conspiracy theorists, or the outright dismissal of conspiracy theorists. And that gets bandied about, and this term was started by the CIA in relation to the Kennedy assassination. And this dismissal kind of flies in the face of lived experience that people have in America or around the world. People live through conspiracies all the time. And, people have a lived experience of experiencing conspiracies, and I definitely am one of those people. And the outright dismissal of conspiracy theorists with regards to an event that is a very destructive event, and in particular, the weather. Uh, I was reading in my other book, actually just yesterday, and it was discussing LBJ wrote about a mastery of the weather in 1960 something, or so, in the 1960s. And I was reminded of that LBJ and JFK both gave public speeches before governing bodies. I think one was the UN and one might have been Congress. And they both gave public speeches during their presidencies about the need to control the weather and the ongoing effort to control the weather. And so, here we are 60 years later, 60 some odd years later, and you have to wonder, how far did that progress during those 60 years? I don't want to do the da as I talk, but I'm trying not to. So, 60 years he was talking about controlling the weather, and both he and JFK, and it makes you wonder how much did that technology proliferate in the world. how much did that technology proliferate in the world? And uh, so when you have an event that's destructive like this with fires, and you are a schizophrenic where you experience them coordinating weather events with your daily activity, uh, somebody's messaging to you, hey, we can control the weather, so watch out. And all right, so I started thinking, like, with California potentially being subject to like a covert war, and you know, you see right now what's going on with Hamas and Israel. There's a ceasefire talk going on, but I guess there's been ceasefire talks going on for quite some time, so it makes you wonder if these events were related to that, or maybe they're part of some other event. And so, you know, anyway, so I was thinking, like, where could I go in the world, or where could we go? And I don't know where you could go with that will avoid natural disasters or climate change or covert war, whatever is going on. And so I started researching, and apparently there's a lot of places on the East Coast that are kind of free of disasters. Not free, but there's less disasters on the Upper East Coast. But um, yeah, so uh, all right, I'm gonna get into another topic here, and I was reading in my book about Google, and they have a company called Calico that's trying to cheat death, or not cheat, but beat death. They're trying to win a battle against death and avoid death or whatever. And they talked about Peter Thiel as another guy who is a billionaire who's has the dream of immortality, and so it makes you wonder: is this just the iceberg, and there's something else going on with regards to that in the world? And you know, so I don't know. But Calico is a company that is connected to Google, and they're trying to cheat death. Okay, so the Red Sox didn't integrate until 1959, 12 years after Jackie Robinson. And I was learning about this yesterday as I was reading my baseball book, and uh, it's kind of interesting. I didn't realize it took almost till 1960, and that's right around the time Kennedy is running for president. And it makes you, it's kind of crazy. I didn't realize that was part of Boston's history. I knew Boston had a racial racial discrimination issue going back some time, but I didn't know it was that bad to where their Major League Baseball team was 12 years was the last Major League Baseball team to integrate. And that's kind of surprising to me, knowing what I know. And yeah, so interesting. Okay. All right, so like I say, I don't know if that's Big Brother or if that is like represents some sort of not so nice aspect of that area of the country, but I guess things are better now. So okay, Palestine-Israel America Big Brother control. Okay, so I don't particularly trust Israel. I don't particularly trust Palestine. I don't particularly trust America, and I wonder if the entire operation in Palestine and Israel is a Big Brother op to divide the world and control the world and control politics in the world, and perhaps people die, and but they're like sacrifices. These people are like human sacrifices, and it's like same thing that I just wonder about this weather event in LA. I wonder if it's a Big Brother event, and there's human sacrifice involved. I like to think that they faked all the deaths and they're that good at these things, but I don't know, And so uh, I just wonder if there is like a big brother organization controlling both sides of these wars. And I like to think that they're fake because, like I said, like when you're schizophrenic, the schizophrenic reality is such that you don't necessarily know what's going on. But like I told you about John Kirby and his declaration at the Pentagon podium about fake victims, fake mourners, fake explosions, fake corpses, even. So makes you wonder. And I, like I said, I actually got into a discussion with a guy that called himself a colonel, and he wished hell and fire on my home and where I live and everything. And Homeland Security should probably take a look at that because I think we're like a few months later, and now this weird, crazy event is happening in the middle of a ceasefire talk in Israel. But Homeland Security is probably Big Brother, so obviously, like they're not going to investigate something like that. All right, so anyways, yeah, that's my thought. I don't really know what's. I just suspect that these wars are controlled on all sides, and I'm not even sure how real they are. And even if they are real, they could be kind of like sacrifices of people for some sort of other political agenda. And yeah, so like I said at the beginning of this segment today, uh, LBJ and JFK were both talking about controlling the weather going back to 1960s. And now you have a situation where perhaps that technology proliferates to all kinds of different groups of people, or maybe it is a sophisticated control operation in the world. Maybe we're under some weather dictatorship. And yeah, so uh I don't know. I don't, these things, it's like nobody, it's almost like weird thing that nobody's allowed to talk about. You're not allowed to question events, it's conspiracy theory, they just said dismissal, but the dismissal of conspiracy theory flies in the face of lived experience that people have as Americans and people in society. So it's a little weird. Uh, Matthew McConaughey dad was crazy, and I'm reading in Matthew McConaughey's book about his dad, and in this particular event that I'm reading about, his dad challenged his brother to a fight because his brother didn't want to steal pipes off cars and trucks and stuff like that. And apparently, their brother and the dad used to go around and bond. His Matthew McConaughey's brother was an older brother named Mike, I think, and his dad used to go steal pipes off cars, and that's how they would bond. And then Matthew McConaughey's brother was working for some salesman as a salesman, and he opened an account with a very well-to-do guy named Don Knowles. And McConaughey describes a situation where the dad was like, "We're gonna go steal Don Knowles' pipe," and Matthew McConaughey's brother didn't want to do it, and the dad started beating him up, and then the kid picked up a 2x4 and smacked the dad. It was a crazy, and I'm so lucky to have my dad. So yeah, I started thinking, my God, I can't imagine something like that, and it's just it's a very interesting little childhood that he had. It's literally crazy. But then I started thinking, like, his mom talked about how she lied all the time. So I was wondering, like, could he make stuff up in his book? But probably not. It's probably something that he's seems to be different. All right. So I guess this is about it for today. Thank you for listening. It's been 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop.